The prepaid electric meter began its warning beep at 1:47 in the morning. 3 sharp chirps that meant she had maybe an hour of power left, maybe less if the ancient radiator kept cycling. Lucia Vega didn't move from where she sat at the cramped kitchen table, her phone's blue glow illuminating the stack of receipts she'd arranged in careful rows. Rent, formula, diapers, the clinic copay she still owed. Each slip of paper a tiny white flag of surrender she refused to wave. Outside, Chicago's winter pressed against the window of her third-floor walk-up in Humboldt Park, determined and cold. The glass was old, single pane, the kind that sweated condensation and let the wind speak through the cracks. Somewhere in the distance, the brown line rattled past, that familiar metal-on-metal lullaby she'd learned to sleep through. Tonight, though, sleep wasn't coming. The radiator hissed and clanked, performing its inconsistent magic. Heat was included in her rent, when the building super remembered to keep the boiler running. The prepaid electricity was hers to manage, fed in $20 increments at the corner store, each transaction eating into the careful calculations she remade every week. 3 chirps, a pause, 3 more. Lucia's gaze drifted to the baby monitor on the counter, its small screen showing Mateo asleep in his crib, 10 months old and mercifully, finally, down for what she hoped might be a 3-hour stretch. His tiny chest rose and fell in the greenish night vision glow. Perfect, unaware, deserving of so much more than this. She looked back at the receipts. The one from the Roosevelt Road pharmacy sat at the top of the pile, the numbers practically glowing with accusation. $43.97 for a container of formula that had cost $28.99 just 6 weeks ago. She'd stood in that bright fluorescent aisle for 11 minutes, her phone calculator open, trying to find a way to make the math work. The store-brand alternative was barely cheaper, and Mateo's pediatrician, one of the good ones at the West Side Community Health Clinic, had been specific about the formula he needed. Sensitive stomach, no substitutions. So she'd paid. And then she'd come home and opened the container and done the measurements and realized that at this rate, at these prices, she had maybe 9 days of formula left. Rent was due in 12. The night shift at the call center had ended 4 months ago when the company moved operations to somewhere cheaper. The housekeeping job she'd found to replace it had lasted exactly 3 weeks before the hotel quietly let go of everyone hired after July. Restructuring, the manager had said, not meeting her eyes. There was a waitressing position she'd interviewed for yesterday, but they'd balked when she explained she'd need a schedule that worked around Mateo's daycare hours. The daycare she could barely afford. The daycare that closed at 6. There was no one to call for help. Mateo's father had made his position clear when she'd told him she was keeping the baby. He'd handed her $300 and a piece of paper with a lawyer's number, then asked her not to contact him again. She hadn't. Her mother had been gone 6 years now. Cancer that moved too fast for goodbyes. Her father had left long before that, when Lucia was still young enough to believe he might come back. There were cousins somewhere, scattered across other states, other lives. But here, in this city, in this apartment with its beeping meter and cold windows, it was just her and Mateo. It had always been just them. Lucia pressed her palms against her eyes, hard enough to see stars. At 26, she'd already learned to carry exhaustion like a second skin. Her dark hair, normally worn long and loose, was pulled back in a messy bun, and the circles under her brown eyes had become permanent fixtures. She'd been pretty once, she thought distantly. Before the pregnancy, before the sleepless nights, before survival became a full-time job. Now she was just tired. She wasn't asking for much. Just a chance to work. Just enough to keep the lights on and her son fed and maybe, one day save enough to stop living week to week, crisis to crisis, beep to beep. When she lowered her hands, her vision caught on the Roosevelt Road receipt again. There was something printed at the bottom, below the transaction total. Small text, the kind designed to be ignored. Questions about pricing or product quality? Contact the H&C Ethics line, 1-877-HC-ETHIC, 1-423-8442. Harrison & Cole Foods is committed to fair practices and community standards. Lucia read it twice. An ethics line. For a food company, the formula manufacturer, she realized, the parent corporation behind the brand she'd just overpaid for. Some massive outfit, probably headquartered in a glass tower somewhere in the Loop. With executives who'd never stood in a pharmacy at 9 at night, trying to decide between feeding their child and keeping the heat on. The meter chirped again. Mateo stirred on the monitor, his little fist curling and uncurling, then settling. She could call, leave a message, tell someone, anyone, that their prices were pushing people like her past the edge. That fair practices was a nice phrase to print on a receipt, but it meant nothing when parents were watering down formula to make it stretch, when babies were going hungry because the math simply didn't work anymore. They wouldn't care. They'd never even listen to the message. But maybe, and this was the thought that made her reach for her phone, maybe they had resources listed. Maybe companies that printed ethics hotline numbers also had programs, grants, assistance funds. Maybe there was night work available, cleaning offices or data entry, something she could do after Mateo slept. It was 1:53 in the morning. No one would answer, which meant she could leave a message without the weight of someone's pity in real time, without having to hear her own desperation reflected back in a stranger's careful, trained sympathy. Lucia pulled up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. The line rang once, twice. Then a generic voicemail greeting, professional and distant. You've reached the Harrison & Cole Foods Ethics and Compliance Hotline. Your call is important to us. Please leave a detailed message and a representative will respond within 2 business days. The beep sounded. She took a breath. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Hi, my name is Lucia. I'm calling about your formula prices. She paused, aware suddenly of how quiet the apartment was, except for the hiss of the radiator and the distant hum of the city outside. The phone felt too heavy in her hand. Or maybe she was just tired. So tired. I bought a container of your premium sensitivity formula tonight. Formula I've been buying for 7 months. 6 weeks ago it was $28.99. Tonight it was $43.97. She heard the edge creep into her voice and pulled it back. This wasn't about anger. Anger was a luxury. That's a 52% increase in 6 weeks. On the monitor, Mateo shifted, his small mouth working in his sleep, dreaming of something. Milk, probably. Comfort. Things she was running out of ways to provide. I know you probably have reasons. Supply chain, inflation, whatever the official answer is. But I need you to understand what that number means to someone like me. She stopped, swallowed. It means I have 9 days of formula left, and rent is due in 12. It means I'm going to have to choose. And that shouldn't be a choice any parent has to make. The words were coming faster now, months of pressure finding a crack to escape through. I've called 17 places this week looking for work. Night shifts, weekend work, anything that lets me be home with my son during the day, because childcare costs more than I'd make in most jobs. Everyone says they're hiring, but when you actually need the hours to work around a baby, suddenly there's nothing. Her throat tightened. She should hang up. This was pointless. Some underpaid compliance worker would listen to this message on Monday morning, check a box on a form, and delete it. Nothing would change. The prices would keep climbing, and she'd keep falling further behind, and... I'm not asking for a handout, she said. and her voice came out harder than she'd intended. I'm asking if your company has night positions available. Remote work, data entry, anything. I can type 70 words per minute. I'm good with numbers. I show up and I work hard, and I just need a chance. The prepaid meter chirped again, closer together now. Warning turning to urgency. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what ethics hotlines are for. But that number is printed on your receipt right under community standards. And I guess I thought. She trailed off, the absurdity of it hitting her all at once. She was leaving a job application on a corporate complaint line at 2 a.m. This was desperation with a phone number. Mateo made a small sound through the monitor, not quite waking. That soft grunt that meant he was surfacing from deep sleep, that she had maybe 5 minutes before he'd need her again. My number is 3112-550147, she said quickly. If anyone actually listens to this and your company has any kind of work assistance program or knows of positions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you for your time. She hung up before she could say anything else, before she could apologize again or explain further or make herself smaller than she already felt. The phone screen went dark in her hand. 2:01 a.m. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window in its frame. The brown line rumbled past again, carrying people to night shifts and early mornings, everyone moving through the city's dark hours with their own private mathematics of survival. Lucia set the phone down on the table, face down, and pressed her fingertips against the cool formica surface. The receipts were still there, still demanding answers she didn't have. The meter was still chirping. Mateo was still depending on her. Nothing had changed. She'd thrown a message into the void, and the void would stay silent, the way it always did. Monday morning, someone in a comfortable office would delete it without a second thought. She knew this, had known it even as she was dialing. But she'd said it, put words to the impossible math, and maybe that was something. Mateo's cry cut through the quiet, thin and building. Lucia stood, her body moving on autopilot, and went to him. There was still enough formula for tonight, still enough power for another hour, still enough of her to keep going. Tomorrow she'd figure out the rest. She always did. Marcus Chen had learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep. At 34, he wore his insomnia in the sharp lines of his face and the premature gray threading through his dark hair. He kept himself disciplined, tailored suits even at midnight, clean-shaven, the controlled exterior of someone who'd fought his way up from nothing and refused to look like he belonged anywhere but the top. His mother used to say he had his father's Korean features and her Chinese stubbornness. Marcus had learned to use both. He still recalled vividly back when his mother worked 3 jobs and he'd wake at 2 a.m. to the sound of her coming home, exhausted beyond words. 30 years later, the insomnia remained, but the reasons had changed. Now he sat in his office on the 43rd floor of Harrison & Cole's headquarters in the Loop. Chicago's skyline spread before him like a circuit board of light, and read emails that never seemed to stop coming. Legal briefs, quarterly projections, supply chain reports that should have been someone else's problem, but somehow always ended up on his desk at midnight. The office was dark, except for the blue glow of his monitor and the city beyond the glass. He'd sent his assistant home at 7. Security knew he was here. They always knew. But otherwise, the building was silent. This was his time. The hours when he could think without someone needing a decision or a signature or a diplomatic answer to a problem that had no good solutions. His phone buzzed. An internal notification from the ethics hotline system. Marcus almost dismissed it. The hotline forwarded summaries to his office every morning. Urgent calls went through to legal. But something made him click through to the queue. Maybe the timestamp. 2:01 a.m. Most complaints came during business hours, carefully composed and often coached by lawyers. Middle-of-the-night calls were different. Raw, real. The entry was flagged as non-urgent, already routed for a standard response. Customer complaint. Pricing concern. But there was a note in the system that the caller had also asked about employment opportunities, which had confused the automated routing. Marcus clicked play. "Hi, my name is Lucia. I'm calling about your formula prices." The voice was young, tired, the kind of tired that lived in your bones. He heard the pause, the breath she took before continuing, and something in him went still. He listened to the whole message. Then he listened to it again. "That's a 52% increase in 6 weeks. Marcus pulled up the pricing data on his other monitor. She was right. Not quite 52%, but close enough. The formula division had pushed through an increase in October, citing increased costs from their supplier, a request he'd approved, because the numbers on paper had made sense and the VP of that division had given him assurances that it wouldn't impact market access. Assurances. He was learning to hate that word. "It means I have 9 days of formula left, and rent is due in 12. On the voicemail, something changed in the background. A sound he recognized immediately, even though it had been years since he'd heard it in person. A baby crying. Not screaming, but that persistent, exhausted fussing of an infant too tired to settle. The woman, Lucia, kept talking, trying to get through her point before the baby fully woke. And Marcus found himself leaning closer to the speaker, as if proximity could help him hear better. "I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking if your company has night positions available." She wasn't begging. That was what struck him. She was negotiating, offering value for value. 70 words per minute, good with numbers. Shows up and works hard. A resume delivered at 2 a.m. to a hotline that wasn't designed to hear it. The baby's cry grew louder in the background. Lucia's voice sped up, words tumbling together, and then the message ended. Marcus sat in the blue-lit darkness of his office and stared at the phone number on his screen. 312-55-0147. He shouldn't call. This was what HR was for, what the proper channels existed to handle. He could forward this to community relations, let them send her information about assistance programs, maybe flag her resume if she applied through the normal website. Clean, professional, appropriate. The baby's cry echoed in his memory. His mother had sounded like that once, on a phone call he'd overheard when he was 14. Trying to negotiate a payment plan with the electric company, her voice steady and professional, even though Marcus had seen the shutoff notice on the kitchen counter. She'd offered to work extra hours at the grocery store, to clean the offices after her shift. Anything to keep the lights on for 1 more month. The supervisor had said no. Policy was policy. Marcus had never forgotten the sound of his mother's voice as she'd hung up that phone. The way she'd sat at their kitchen table in the dark and cried, quiet enough that she thought he wouldn't hear. He looked at the clock. 2:23 a.m. She wouldn't answer. She'd said she was calling because no one would pick up, because she could leave the message without the humiliation of real-time rejection. If he called now, he'd be violating that assumption, intruding on her privacy. But the baby had been crying, and it was 2:23 in the morning, and if her prepaid meter was really running out. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed before he could think better of it. The line rang, once, twice. He should hang up. This was... Hello? Her voice was different now. Alert. Worried. The wariness of someone who knew that calls at this hour were never good news. Marcus cleared his throat. "Ms. Vega? My name is Marcus Chen. I'm calling from Harrison and Cole Foods. You left a message on our ethics line." Silence. He could hear her breathing. hear the baby making small sounds in the background. I listened to your voicemail, he continued, trying to keep his voice gentle, professional, not intrusive. All of it. And I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Lucia's first thought was that something had happened to someone she knew. That was what calls at 2:24 in the morning meant. Hospitals, accidents, the kind of news that shattered what was left of your life into smaller, sharper pieces. Her second thought, when the man said his name and company, was that this was a scam. Some elaborate phishing scheme that had scraped her information from the voicemail she'd just left. I'm sorry, what? Marcus Chen, he repeated, and his voice was calm, patient. I'm the CEO of Harrison & Cole Foods. You called our ethics line about 20 minutes ago. Lucia sank onto the edge of her bed, Mateo warm and drowsy against her shoulder. The CEO. She'd left a rambling, desperate message on a corporate hotline, and the CEO was calling her back at 2 in the morning. This was absolutely a scam. I know this is unexpected, he said, as if reading her thoughts. And I know you called because you didn't expect anyone to answer. But I was in the office, and I heard your message, and He paused. I'd like to help, if you'll allow me to. Help how? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, defensive. Mateo squirmed, and she adjusted him, rubbing small circles on his back. Look, if this is some kind of... Your formula increased from $28.99 to $43.97 in 6 weeks, Marcus said quietly. You have a 7-month-old son who needs sensitivity formula. You're looking for night work that won't conflict with childcare. And your prepaid meter is about to run out. Lucia's breath caught. Those were her words, her specific details. I can have formula delivered to you within the hour, he continued. The correct type, enough for a month. And I'd like to send a high-capacity power bank, the kind that can run small appliances. Consider it an apology for the pricing issue you raised. Because you're right. That increase was too much, too fast. And you shouldn't have to choose between feeding your son and keeping the lights on. Pride and need warred in her chest, need winning by inches. I don't want charity. I know, you said that. There was something in his voice. Respect, maybe, or recognition. That's why I'm also offering you work. Temporary assignment, 2 weeks to start, night hours. It won't be glamorous. Cafeteria support staff, inventory, basic administrative tasks. But it's real work and it pays $18 an hour through our staffing vendor. $18 an hour, 2 weeks. That was Lucia's mind did the math automatically. That was enough to cover rent, enough to buy time to find something permanent. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? The pause that followed felt weighted with something she couldn't name. Because a long time ago, someone should have helped my mother the way I'm offering to help you, Marcus said finally. And they didn't. And I remember what that cost. Lucia closed her eyes. Mateo's breathing had evened out against her shoulder, his small body heavy with sleep. Outside, the radiator clanked. The prepaid meter gave another warning chirp. The formula and power bank aren't conditional on you accepting the work, Marcus continued. I want to be clear about that. What you described in your message, that's an emergency. Let me address the emergency first. Then, if you want the work, we can discuss details. I don't understand, Lucia said quietly. CEOs don't call people back at 2 in the morning. They don't. This doesn't happen. No, he agreed. Usually it doesn't. But your message. He trailed off, then seemed to decide something. You were right to call, about all of it. The pricing is a problem I didn't know we had. The lack of accessible employment opportunities, that's another problem. You've identified real issues. and I'd rather fix them than have someone write them in a report I'll read in 3 months when it's too late to matter. Lucia opened her eyes and looked at her phone screen, at the unknown number glowing there. This felt impossible. Felt like the kind of thing that happened in movies or stories, not to exhausted single mothers in Humboldt Park walk-ups at 2:30 in the morning. But Mateo was warm in her arms, and the meter was still beeping, and $18 an hour was $18 an hour. If I say yes, she said carefully, to the work, it's real? Not some made-up position where people feel sorry for me? It's real, Marcus said. We use a staffing agency for temporary support positions. I'll have them contact you in the morning with a formal offer and paperwork. The work exists, we just hadn't filled it yet. You'll report to the night cafeteria manager, not to me. You'll clock in and out like everyone else. And if you do good work, there may be opportunities to extend or transition to something permanent. And the formula? The power bank? Those ship tonight. I'll have my assistant coordinate delivery, should arrive by 4 a.m. There's a 24-hour courier service we use for urgent situations. He paused. This qualifies as urgent. Lucia felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite hope. She'd learned not to trust hope. But something adjacent to it. Possibility, maybe. Room to breathe. Okay, she whispered. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said. And there was something almost wry in his tone. Night shift cafeteria work is hard. If you still want to thank me in 2 weeks, I'll accept it then. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the surreal impossibility of this entire conversation, Lucia felt her mouth curve into something almost like a smile. I work hard, she said. I believe you. He sounded like he meant it. Someone from the staffing agency will call you by 10 a.m. Her name is Patricia Ramos. She'll handle all the paperwork and scheduling. He paused. I'll need your address for the delivery, the formula and power bank. Lucia hesitated for only a moment. He'd already heard her desperation on the voicemail, already knew she was out of options. What was an address compared to that? 3847 West Potomac Avenue, she said. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Thank you. The courier will call when they're 5 minutes out, so you're not startled by the buzzer. And Lucia? Yes? Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The line went dead. Lucia sat in the darkness of her bedroom, Mateo breathing softly against her shoulder, and stared at her phone. The meter chirped again, but somehow it sounded less urgent now. Less like a countdown to disaster and more like a reminder that she had until 4 a.m. That help was coming. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. She stood carefully, settled Mateo back in his crib, and watched him sleep for a long moment. His small fist curled near his cheek, his lips pursed in dreams. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I think we're going to be okay. Outside, the city hummed on, indifferent and cold. But inside, for the first time in months, something felt like it might be shifting, like the terrible math might finally, impossibly, start to balance. Lucia went back to the kitchen, looked at the receipt still spread across the table, and allowed herself one long, shaking breath. Then she started to plan. The delivery arrived at 3:47 a.m., announced by a quiet buzz from her phone and then the intercom. Lucia had been dozing on the couch, unable to fully sleep, half convinced she'd dreamed the entire phone call. The courier was professional and sleepy, handing over 2 boxes without comment. She signed on his electronic pad with shaking hands, carried the boxes inside, and stood in her kitchen staring at them like they might disappear. The first box contained 6 containers of formula. The exact brand, the exact type. Enough for 6 weeks. Maybe more if she was careful. The second held a power bank the size of a briefcase, matte black and surprisingly heavy, with charging cables and a laminated instruction sheet. Lucia sat on her kitchen floor and cried for 3 minutes, timed by the microwave clock. Then she washed her face, fed Mateo his 4 a.m. bottle, and tried to figure out what happened next. Patricia Ramos called at 9:52 a.m., 8 minutes early. "Ms. Vega, this is Patricia from Apex Staffing Solutions. I understand you'll be joining us for a temporary assignment with Harrison and Cole Foods." The woman's voice was warm, efficient, with a Chicago accent that felt like home. Lucia, bouncing Mateo on her hip while he grabbed for her phone, felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Yes, that's right. Wonderful. Let's get you set up. I'm emailing you the onboarding paperwork now. Should be in your inbox. Tax forms, direct deposit, the standard pieces. Nothing complicated. Can you come by our office this afternoon around 2 to complete everything and get your badge? Lucia glanced at Mateo, who was chewing contentedly on a teething ring. The clinic had morning walk-in hours. She could take him in for his scheduled checkup, then head to the staffing office. 2 works. Perfect. Our office is in the Loop, Madison and Clark. Bring 2 forms of ID, and I'll have everything else ready. Your first shift is tomorrow night, Friday, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You'll report to the H&C building on Wacker. I'll include the address and entry instructions in the email. Tomorrow night. Less than 24 hours. What exactly will I be doing? Lucia asked. You'll start in cafeteria support, evening meal prep cleanup, inventory counts, basic cleaning tasks. The night manager is Dolores Washington. She's been with H&C for 18 years and she runs a tight ship, but she's fair. Show up on time, work hard, and you'll be fine. Patricia paused. There's also an attached childcare stipend. Harrison and Cole partners with several 24-hour care facilities for night shift workers. I'll give you the list this afternoon. It's not charity, she added, as if sensing Lucia's hesitation. It's part of the benefits package for this position classification. Lucia closed her eyes. She'd been prepared to ask her downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to listen for Mateo through the monitor. To pray he didn't wake up screaming while she was gone. To feel guilty and terrified and grateful all at once. A real childcare stipend. Professional care. Thank you, she managed. Just doing my job. See you at 2, Ms. Vega. The line clicked off. Lucia looked down at Mateo, who gazed back at her with his wide, dark eyes. Her eyes, and gummed his teething ring with serious concentration. We have a job, she told him. A real job. Mateo blew a spit bubble. Later, while Mateo napped, Lucia found herself Googling Harrison and Cole Foods. The company website was sleek and corporate, but Marcus Chen's bio page showed a professional headshot that somehow matched his 2 a.m. voice. Dark hair, serious dark eyes, maybe mid-30s. Younger than she'd expected for a CEO. The caption said he'd taken over the company 5 years ago. There was a quote about ethical business practices and community responsibility. She'd closed the browser, feeling strange, like she'd glimpsed something she wasn't supposed to see. She spent the rest of the morning in motion, propelled by something that felt dangerously close to hope. The clinic appointment went smoothly. Mateo was healthy, hitting his milestones, the pediatrician pleased with his progress. The staffing office was glass and chrome. Patricia, a round-faced woman in her 50s, who walked Lucia through each form with patient efficiency and didn't ask any questions about how she'd gotten the position. By 4 p.m., Lucia had a badge on a lanyard, a folder full of paperwork, and a list of 3 childcare centers that had overnight availability. She chose the one closest to the H&C building, Little Stars Academy, open 24/7, with actual certifications and reviews that didn't make her stomach hurt with worry. She called. They had space. The stipend covered it. By 8 p.m., she'd visited the center, met the overnight staff, filled out emergency forms, and received a tour of the infant room with its soft lighting and rocking chairs and cribs that looked sturdy and clean. Mateo had charmed the director by falling asleep in her arms. "He'll be fine here," the director, a woman named Carmen with kind eyes and graying hair, assured her. "You go do your work. We've got him." Now it was Thursday night, 10:30 p.m., and Lucia stood in front of her closet trying to decide what one wore to night shift cafeteria work at a corporate headquarters. She settled on black pants, a plain navy shirt, comfortable shoes. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired but determined. Mateo was already asleep in his car seat, bundled against the February cold. The diaper bag was packed. The formula, the abundant, impossible formula, sat on her counter in its neat row. Lucia picked up her phone and saw a text from an unknown number, time-stamped 10:18 p.m. "Good luck tonight. You've got this. MC." She read it twice, feeling something warm and complicated settle in her chest. Then she picked up Mateo's car seat, grabbed her keys, and headed out into the Chicago night. Time to work. The Harrison and Cole building rose 47 stories above Wacker Drive, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet money that didn't need to announce itself. Lucia stood on the sidewalk at 10:52 p.m., Mateo's recent drop-off at Little Stars still aching in her chest, and stared up at the lit windows. Somewhere up there, Marcus Chen had an office. Somewhere in this building, he'd listened to her voicemail and decided to call back. She adjusted her badge and pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was marble and silence, her footsteps too loud against the floor. A security guard at the desk, older, black, with kind eyes, checked her badge and nodded her toward the elevators. "Night cafeteria staff reports to B2, he said. "Freight elevator on the left. Dolores is expecting you." The freight elevator was industrial, all function and no polish. It descended with a mechanical hum that reminded Lucia of the L train, familiar and working class. When the doors opened, she stepped into a hallway lit by fluorescent strips, the air smelling of industrial cleaner and something cooking. A woman stood waiting, arms crossed, taking Lucia's measure with a single sweeping glance. Dolores Washington was maybe 60, solid and sturdy in kitchen whites. Her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her expression gave away nothing. "You, Lucia?" "Yes, ma'am." "Patricia says you're a hard worker, that true?" "Yes, ma'am." Dolores's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "We'll see. Come on." The night cafeteria was smaller than Lucia expected, designed to feed security, late-shift workers, and whatever executives burned midnight oil upstairs. Dolores walked her through it in efficient sentences. Dish pit, storage, inventory sheets, the industrial dishwasher that required specific loading. "We serve light meals midnight to 5, Dolores explained. "Before that, you're on prep and cleaning. After that, breakdown and reset for morning shift. Questions?" "No, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am. Makes me feel old." Dolores handed her an apron. "Call me Dolores. You mess up, I'll tell you. You do good work, I'll tell you that too. Fair?" "Fair." "Then let's get started." The work was exactly as promised, hard, unglamorous, real. Lucia scrubbed prep stations, loaded dish racks, counted inventory on a clipboard with careful efficiency. Her hands knew this kind of work. Her body remembered the rhythm of it. Dolores watched without comment for the first hour, then gave a small nod and turned her attention elsewhere. At 1:30 a.m., during a rare quiet moment, Lucia stood at the industrial sink and looked up. Through the cafeteria's small windows, high and narrow, designed for ventilation, she could see a slice of the building across the street. Offices, mostly dark. But one window, many floors up, still glowed. She wondered if Marcus Chen was up there, if he was working late again, caught in whatever kept a CEO at his desk long past midnight. If he was thinking about her at all. 43 floors above, Marcus stood at his window and looked down. He couldn't see the cafeteria from here. Couldn't confirm she'd shown up, though security would have called if she hadn't. He'd resisted the urge to check the security feeds, to confirm with Dolores, to do any of the dozen things that would cross the line from helpful to invasive. She'd asked for work. He'd provided it. The rest was up to her. But still, he stood at the window. And still, he wondered. His phone buzzed. A text from Dolores, succinct as always. New girl showed up. Works clean. No complaints. Marcus allowed himself a small breath of relief. Then he returned to his desk, to the manifests and reports that had started this whole chain of events, and got back to work. At 7 a.m., when Lucia clocked out, Dolores handed her a sealed envelope. "Stipend for tonight's childcare," she said. "You get it each shift day after. Company policy." Lucia took it, the weight of it real in her hands. Real money, real work. "Thank you." "You did fine." Dolores' expression softened almost imperceptibly. "See you tomorrow night." Lucia rode the freight elevator up, stepped into the dawn-lit lobby, and walked out into a Chicago morning that felt different than the night before. Colder, but cleaner. The sun was rising over the lake, painting the buildings gold. She picked up Mateo from Little Stars, he'd slept well, Carmen reported, and carried him to the bus stop, exhausted but steady. 1 shift down, 13 to go. She could do this. Lucia spent her 11th shift documenting everything. She did her regular work, prep, cleaning, inventory, but kept a small notebook in her apron pocket. Each time she processed a delivery, she wrote down 3 numbers: what the manifest claimed, what the system recorded, what she physically counted. The pattern was consistent. Paper and digital always matched. Physical counts were always short, not by much, 10 to 15%, but enough, and always on premium items. Never the bulk staples, never the basics. Just the high-value products that could be resold. By 3 a.m., she had 2 weeks of data reconstructed from memory, and 1 week documented precisely. She stood in the storage area, staring at her notebook, and felt the weight of what she was holding. This wasn't accident. This was theft. The extension number on Marcus's note was still in her pocket. She pulled out her phone, stared at it for a long moment, then typed out a text before she could overthink it. "I have something you should see. When you have time." Lucia, as she hit send at 3:17 a.m., and immediately regretted it. Too vague, too presumptuous. He was a CEO and she was temporary cafeteria staff, and her phone buzzed. B2 break room, 20 minutes. Marcus arrived at 3:38 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee, and the careful neutrality of someone who'd thought about this moment more than he should have. Lucia sat at the small table, her notebook open in front of her, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. She'd removed her apron. Her hair was falling out of its ponytail. There was still that smudge on her cheek he'd noticed before. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with corporate polish and everything to do with the set of her shoulders. The quiet competence. He pushed the thought away and set down the coffee. "You take it black?" "I take it however it comes." She wrapped her hands around the cup, like it was warmth she needed more than caffeine. "Thank you." Marcus sat across from her, maintaining professional distance. "What did you find?" She turned the notebook toward him. 2 weeks of delivery discrepancies. The manifests and the digital system always match perfectly, which is the first red flag. They shouldn't match perfectly if this was human error. Someone's making sure the paperwork looks clean. He scanned her notes. Dates, times, product codes. 3 columns of numbers. Meticulous. But the physical counts are always short, she continued. 10 to 15%, always premium items, never basics. I think someone's diverting product between the warehouse and here, skimming off the top and reselling it. Marcus looked up from the notebook. How long have you known? I noticed it on my 5th night, started documenting on my 11th. She met his eyes. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. I'm temporary, new. Maybe I was counting wrong, or maybe this is just how things work and I don't understand the system. You're not counting wrong. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a file he'd been assembling for 3 weeks. I've been auditing formula pricing anomalies since your call, tracking where our product is supposed to go versus where it's actually showing up. There's a pattern, certain zip codes in Chicago getting almost no stock while secondary markets are flooded with our premium products at markup prices. He showed her his screen. A map of Chicago, red pins clustered in neighborhoods she recognized. Pilsen, Little Village, her own Humboldt Park. Someone's diverting formula and other high-value items from assigned retail distribution, Marcus said. Probably selling it to independent resellers who mark it up. We get paid either way, the paperwork looks clean, and the people who need it most can't find it at legitimate stores. So they pay $44 instead of $29. Lucia said quietly. Yes. She traced one of the red pins on his screen. Potomac Avenue, her street. How high up does this go? I don't know yet. High enough to manipulate manifests and system records. High enough to coordinate across multiple distribution points. He looked at her carefully. High enough that I need to be very careful who I trust. And you trust me? Marcus considered that. This woman who'd called his ethics hotline at 2 a.m., who'd worked hard for 2 weeks without complaint, who'd noticed what his own logistics team had missed or ignored. Yes, he said. I think I do. Something shifted in the air between them. Not quite understanding, but the beginning of it. A recognition that they were both standing on the edge of something larger than either of them had expected. Lucia pulled her notebook back, closed it. What do you need me to do? Keep documenting. Note truck numbers, driver IDs if you can see them, anything that repeats. I'll work the supply chain from my end. He paused. This could get complicated. If you want to step back, I don't. Her voice was firm. Someone's stealing from people who can't afford it. I'm not stepping back. Marcus found himself almost smiling. Okay then. They sat in the fluorescent light of the break room, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them, and began to plan. Over the next 4 nights, they fell into a pattern. Lucia worked her shift, documented discrepancies. At 3 a.m., when the cafeteria hit its quietest hour, Marcus would appear with coffee and they'd compare notes in the break room. She'd show him truck numbers, driver rotations, timing patterns. He'd show her procurement records, warehouse manifests, the digital trails that didn't quite add up. They were careful, professional. Dolores knew something was happening but asked no questions. Security logs would show Marcus conducting routine inspections. Everything appeared above board. But something was shifting between them in those late-night hours. The way Marcus listened when she talked. Like her observations mattered as much as any executive report. The way Lucia had stopped being quite so careful with her words, letting her sharp mind show without apology. On the 15th night, they were in the sub-level hallway outside the break room, studying a timeline Lucia had mapped on her phone when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the hallway plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in after 3 seconds, dim red strips along the baseboards that turned everything strange and shadowed. The HVAC system wound down with a mechanical sigh. Somewhere distant, an alarm chimed softly. Power grid issue. Marcus said, his voice close in the darkness. Happens sometimes in winter. Backup generators will stabilize it in a few minutes. They were standing closer than Lucia had realized. Close enough that she could see his face in the red emergency light, all sharp angles and shadow. Close enough to notice he'd loosened his tie at some point during the night, that there was tiredness in his eyes that matched her own. You don't have to be here every night, she said quietly. I can document and send you reports. You don't have to. I know. He didn't move away. But I want to be. The admission hung between them, meaning more than it should. Why? Lucia asked. Why? Lucia asked. You don't have to do this. You could delegate this to legal, to security. So why? She gestured at the hallway, the late hour, the coffee cups, and shared investigation, and whatever this was becoming. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The emergency lighting cast red across his features, made him look younger somehow, more uncertain. Because you see things, he said finally. Not just the inventory discrepancies, though that too, but you see people, systems, the way things actually work versus how they're supposed to work. He paused. Most people in my position stop seeing that. They look at spreadsheets and forget there are real people behind every number. You called a hotline at 2 a.m. because you were desperate and angry, and you thought someone should know formula prices were hurting families. And you were right. About all of it. I was also broke and out of options. You were brave. His voice was firm. You asked for work, not charity. You kept your dignity even when it would have been easier not to. And now you're helping me fix something that's been broken in my company for God knows how long. He met her eyes. So yes, I want to be here. I want to... He stopped. Whatever he'd been about to say dissolved in the red-lit silence. Lucia's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She should step back. Remember that he was her boss, temporary boss, but still. Remember that this job was everything right now, that she couldn't afford to complicate it with feelings that felt too big and too dangerous. But she didn't step back. Marcus, she said softly, and his name in her mouth felt like crossing a line they'd both been carefully avoiding. The lights flickered again, steadied. The normal fluorescence hummed back to life, harsh and bright after the emergency red. They both blinked, the moment breaking like a soap bubble. Marcus cleared his throat and took a deliberate step backward. I have an early call with legal? Right. And I should finish the prep stations. Lucia clutched her phone, the timeline still glowing on the screen, evidence of the case they were building together. Lucia. He said her name carefully, like he was testing its weight. What we're doing, the investigation, it's important. But it's also going to get complicated. There are people in this company who have a lot to lose if we're right. And I need you to know that whatever happens, your job is protected. You won't... I'm not afraid of complicated, she interrupted. And I'm not doing this because you're protecting me. I'm doing this because it's right. Something in his expression softened. I know. The hallway felt too small suddenly, too charged. Tomorrow night? She asked. Tomorrow night, he confirmed. He left first. Lucia watched him go, watched him straighten his shoulders and become CEO again by the time he reached the elevator. Then she returned to the cafeteria, to her prep stations and inventory sheets, and the ordinary work that suddenly felt like the safest thing in the world. Because the alternative, admitting what she'd felt in that red-lit hallway, was too dangerous to name. 2 nights after the power outage, the investigation had stalled. They were waiting on warehouse access codes Marcus had requested through back channels, trying not to alert whoever was covering the diversions, which left them in the B2 break room at 3:30 a.m. with cooling coffee and nothing productive to do. Lucia traced the rim of her cup, exhausted and wired in equal measure. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus looked up, cautious. "Yes." "Why aren't you married?" She held up a hand. "I don't mean that as I'm not fishing. I'm genuinely asking. You're successful, decent, not terrible looking." She caught herself. That came out wrong. His mouth twitched. "Not terrible looking. I'll take it." "You know what I mean. So why the midnight oil and the empty office?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, turning his own cup between his hands. "My father left when I was 8. Just walked out one morning and never came back. My mother worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep us afloat. 3 jobs, night shifts, the whole cliché." He met Lucia's eyes. "I promised myself I'd build something that mattered. Prove I wasn't like him. But somewhere along the way, building became all I knew how to do. I look up and I'm 34, and the longest relationship I've had is with a quarterly earnings report. That's bleak." "Yeah." He smiled without humor. "What about you? Mateo's father. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." Lucia had known the question would come eventually. She appreciated that he'd waited, that he'd given her the choice. "There's not much to tell. We dated for 4 months. I got pregnant. He made it very clear he wasn't interested in being a father. Gave me $300 and a lawyer's number, asked me not to contact him." She shrugged, the gesture more practiced than she'd like. "So I didn't. Haven't heard from him since. Don't want to." "His loss," Marcus said quietly. "That's what I tell myself." She looked at Mateo's photo on her phone screen, her lock screen now, his sleeping face peaceful and perfect. But some nights, when Mateo's crying and the power's about to cut and I'm trying to figure out how to make $20 cover $40 worth of need, I wonder if he was right. If I was selfish for choosing this when I couldn't really afford it. "You're not selfish. You're brave." Brave and broke look pretty similar at 2 a.m. Marcus reached across the table, not touching her, but close. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Lucia. The way you show up, the way you work, the way you love that kid, even when everything's falling apart. That's not selfish. That's grace." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to." His voice was steady, certain. "I'm saying it because it's true." They sat in the fluorescent quiet, the building settling around them, and something shifted. Not the investigation, not the work, just them. 2 people who'd survived different versions of the same story, who'd learned to keep going when quitting would have been easier. "Marcus?" Lucia said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for calling me back. That first night. Thank you for leaving the message." Outside in the hallway, footsteps approached, security doing rounds. They pulled back instinctively, the professional distance snapping into place like armor. But something had changed, and they both knew it. 3 nights after the power outage, they had their breakthrough. Lucia had cross-referenced delivery schedules with Chicago traffic cameras, public records, nothing proprietary, and found a pattern. The same 3 trucks that showed discrepancies on her manifests were making additional stops between the main warehouse in Elk Grove Village and the H&C distribution center, stops that weren't on any official route. "Bedford Park," Marcus said, studying the map on his laptop. They were in the B2 break room again, 3:15 a.m., the building silent around them. "There's an independent storage facility there. If someone's diverting product, that's where they're holding it before resale. Can you get access to the warehouse logs? Lucia asked. I requested them yesterday from regional operations, Marcus said. Should have them by end of week. He looked at her, his expression serious. We're close. Maybe another week of documentation, and we'll have enough to take to the board without them being able to bury it. Another week, Lucia echoed. Then, softer. That's good. Something in her tone made Marcus look up. Their eyes met across the small table, coffee cups and evidence scattered between them. And for a moment, neither of them pretended this was only about the investigation. Lucia. The break room door swung open. They both straightened, though they hadn't been touching, as a man in a maintenance uniform stepped in. Late 40s, contractor badge, unfamiliar face. Sorry, he said, not looking sorry at all. Just checking the vending machine. Had a report it was jamming. Marcus glanced at the vending machine. It was working fine. He'd used it an hour ago. It seems operational. Just following the ticket. The man worked slowly, unnecessarily checking panels that didn't need checking, his phone angled slightly toward their table. Marcus closed his laptop deliberately. We're done here anyway. After the man left, they sat in heavy silence. His badge said Axis Facility Services. Marcus said quietly. We don't contract with Axis. We use Midwest Building Solutions. Lucia's face went pale. So, he wasn't really... No. Marcus stood. We need to be more careful. Someone knows we're digging. But they both understood it was already too late. By Tuesday morning, the damage would be done. The blog post went live on a Tuesday morning while Lucia was asleep. ChiTownWhistle.com. Single mom cover-up at H&C Foods. Sources inside Harrison and Cole Foods report that CEO Marcus Chen has personally hired a single mother for an undisclosed special assignment, following complaints about formula pricing. The arrangement, which bypasses normal HR channels, has raised questions among staff about favoritism and whether the company is attempting to silence a potential whistleblower with hush money. Photos obtained by Chi-Town Whistle show Chen meeting privately with the employee during overnight hours. There was a photo, blurry but clear enough, of Marcus and Lucia in the break room, heads bent over a laptop, coffee cups between them. Her badge was partially visible. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. Lucia's phone started ringing at 11 a.m. Patricia from the staffing agency, her voice tight and professional. Miss Vega, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your assignment. By noon, Dolores had called. Lucia, honey, I'm sorry, but corporate says you can't come in until this gets sorted out. By 2 p.m., Lucia was sitting at her kitchen table, Mateo playing on a blanket at her feet, staring at the blog post on her phone screen and feeling everything crumble. Special assignment, hush money, favoritism. The comment section was worse. Speculation about what a CEO and a young single mother might really be doing at 3 a.m. Suggestions that she'd manufactured the complaint to get his attention. Accusations that this was typical corporate corruption or typical female manipulation, depending on which commenter you believed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Don't believe what you're reading. We'll fix this. She stared at the message. We'll fix this. As if he could make this disappear with CEO authority and damage control. As if her name, even unnamed in the article, wasn't already being whispered about in break rooms and group chats. She didn't respond. Marcus stood in his office on the 43rd floor and listened to his head of communications explain why this was a catastrophe. The optics are terrible, Jennifer said bluntly. CEO personally intervenes for a complainant, creates a job, provides childcare stipends, then conducts private late-night meetings. It looks like either a cover-up or an inappropriate relationship. The board is calling an emergency session. It was legitimate temporary employment, Marcus said, his jaw tight. Through our contracted staffing agency. She's been doing inventory work, and those meetings were about a procurement issue I'm investigating. Then why not conduct those meetings during business hours? Why not involve procurement or legal? Jennifer's voice wasn't unkind, just relentlessly practical. Marcus, I believe you. But perception is reality in situations like this. And right now, you look either corrupt or compromised. Marcus turned to the window. Chicago sprawled below him in afternoon sunlight. Someone tipped the blog? Someone who knew about the warehouse log request? Or someone who genuinely thought they were reporting misconduct? The photo was taken by someone with a fake contractor badge. Someone who doesn't work for our actual facilities company. Marcus turned back to face her. This wasn't ethical concern, Jennifer. This was a preemptive strike. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. You're saying the blog post is connected to your procurement investigation? Yes. Can you prove that? Not yet. But I will. He looked at his phone, at Lucia's continued silence. I need to talk to her. Marcus. Jennifer's voice was firm. The board wants distance. No contact until legal clears this. If you reach out now, it looks like coordination, like you're trying to align stories. I don't care how it looks. You should. Because if you get fired over this, you can't protect her or finish the investigation. Jennifer stood. Give legal 24 hours. Let them interview her separately, review the employment records, establish that everything was above board. Then you can talk. After she left, Marcus typed out 6 different messages to Lucia and deleted them all. Finally, he sent, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you talk to anyone about our investigation? The response came after a long pause. No. Then, but you have to ask, don't you? Because that's what everyone's thinking. Marcus closed his eyes. Lucia, it's not like that. I understand why you have to distance yourself. It's fine. I'll handle this. Wait. But she'd gone offline. Lucia sat on her kitchen floor and let herself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. The shame, the anger, the fear that she'd just lost everything. The job, the childcare stipend, any chance of finding legitimate work after being the subject of a corporate scandal blog post. And underneath it all, the sharp hurt of Marcus's question. Did you talk to anyone? He had to ask. She knew that. But it still felt like he was choosing the company over her. Choosing optics over trust. Mateo crawled over and pulled himself up on her knee, babbling something that sounded almost like words. She picked him up and held him tight. We're okay, she whispered. We've been okay before. We'll figure it out. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Vega? A woman's voice, nervous and low. My name is Beth Cranston. I work in accounts payable at H&C. Lucia's grip tightened on her phone. How did you get this number? Employee directory. I'm sorry to call like this, but... Beth took a breath. I saw the blog post this morning, and I think I know why someone wanted to discredit you and Mr. Chen. I'm listening. About 2 weeks ago, Mr. Chen started requesting warehouse distribution logs, reconciliation reports, the kind of deep dive records that CFOs look at, not CEOs. I work in accounts payable, and I've been seeing irregularities. Payments to shell companies that don't match any contracts I can find. Invoices that look legitimate on the surface, but don't add up when you cross-reference them. Lucia's heart started beating faster. You think he was investigating? I think you both were. That blog post, it's not about ethics or favoritism. It's about shutting down whatever you two were uncovering. Beth's voice dropped lower. And if they're willing to go after the CEO publicly, these people are dangerous. But I have documents, real evidence, payment records, wire transfers, the names on the shell company registrations. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I'm a single mother with 2 kids, and I need this job, Beth said bluntly. And because people who ask questions about the regional director tend to get reassigned or laid off in the next round of cuts. But after seeing what they did to you, her voice hardened. I realized staying quiet isn't keeping me safe. It's just making me complicit. Lucia looked at Matteo, at her apartment, at everything she'd been trying to protect. What do you need? She asked. I need to know this is going somewhere. That if I hand over evidence, someone will actually do something with it. That it won't just get buried by the people involved. Beth paused. Can you promise me that? Lucia thought about Marcus, boxed in by his board and corporate politics. About the investigation they'd built together. About the mothers in Pilsen and Little Village paying $44 for formula that should cost $29. I can't promise anything, Lucia said honestly. But I can promise I won't let it go. If you give me evidence, I'll make sure it gets to people who can't ignore it. That's good enough, Beth said. I can meet you tomorrow, somewhere not connected to H&C. Marcus got the call from security at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Mr. Brobida, Chen, we've traced the contractor badge from Monday night. It was reported stolen 3 weeks ago from an Axis Facility Services van. The man in the footage doesn't match any employee records. Send me everything, Marcus said. By 8 a.m., he had Beth Cranston's evidence, delivered through legal, who'd verified her identity and the document's authenticity. Payment records showing systematic diversion over 8 months. Wire transfers to shell companies registered to the regional director's brother-in-law. A paper trail so clear it was almost insulting. By 9 a.m., he'd called an emergency board meeting. Jennifer had warned him, go public and risk the board's wrath, or bury it and protect the company's reputation. But sitting in his office, looking at those records, Marcus heard his mother's voice on that phone call 30 years ago. The electric company supervisor saying policy is policy, while she begged for 1 more month. Some policies were worth breaking. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. Lucia watched it on her phone from her apartment, Matteo napping in her arms. Marcus stood at a podium in H&C's lobby, the Chicago flag pin on his lapel, looking exhausted and determined. Reporters crowded the space, cameras flashing. Good afternoon. I'm here to address both the recent blog allegations and a more serious matter we've uncovered at Harrison & Cole Foods. He didn't waste time on the favoritism accusations. He acknowledged the optics, confirmed that all employment procedures had been proper and verified by legal, and moved on. More importantly, an internal investigation has revealed a systematic product diversion scheme operating within our distribution network. Over the past 8 months, premium products, including infant formula, have been diverted from assigned retail locations to secondary markets where they've been resold at inflated prices. Lucia's breath caught. He was really doing it. This scheme particularly impacted lower-income neighborhoods in Chicago, Pilsen, Little Village, Humboldt Park, and others, areas where families were forced to pay significantly more for essential products or go without. His voice hardened. This is theft. From our company, yes. But more importantly, from the communities we're supposed to serve. He named names. The regional director, 2 warehouse supervisors, the shell companies, everything. These individuals have been terminated, and we're cooperating fully with law enforcement. But termination isn't enough. Marcus looked directly into the camera. We're implementing immediate reforms. price caps on essential products in underserved areas, a verified retail partner program, and a public procurement transparency portal. Anyone can track our distribution in real time. A reporter shouted a question about the blog post, about the temporary employee. Marcus's expression didn't change. The person who first brought pricing discrepancies to my attention showed more integrity and attention to detail than some people who've worked here for years. That person noticed what our systems missed and what some people deliberately hid. I won't apologize for listening. The press conference ended. Lucia sat in her living room, her phone screen going dark, and felt something shift in her chest. He'd done it. Despite the board, despite the optics, despite everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Can we talk? I'm outside." Marcus. She found him on the sidewalk below her building, still in his suit from the press conference, looking up at her third-floor window like he wasn't sure she'd come down. When she appeared in the doorway, his expression cracked with relief. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Lucia stayed on the top step, keeping distance between them. That was quite a press conference. I should have done it sooner. Should have believed you from the start without questioning. He stopped, started again. "I'm sorry. For asking if you leaked. For letting corporate politics make me doubt you even for a second. You were right about everything, and I should have trusted that. You were in an impossible position. That's not an excuse." Marcus climbed 2 steps, then stopped, giving her the choice to close the distance or keep it. "Lucia, I didn't just come here to apologize about the investigation. I came because I need you to know that these last few weeks, working with you, talking with you at 3 a.m., watching you be brilliant and brave and unwilling to compromise." He paused. It stopped being about the investigation a long time ago. Lucia's heart was doing complicated things. "Marcus, I know the timing is terrible. I know there's still cleanup to do and probably more headlines coming. But I also know I'm standing on your sidewalk at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday because I couldn't go another day without telling you that you matter. Not as an employee or an informant or any other professional designation, you matter." She looked at him. This CEO who'd called her back at 2 a.m., who'd offered work instead of charity, who'd just blown up his own company's reputation because it was the right thing to do. "There's a community town hall tomorrow night," she said quietly. "The alderman called after your press conference. People want answers, want to make sure this transparency thing is real. We should be there. Together." "Together," Marcus repeated, and the word held weight. Lucia came down the steps until they were level. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" "Not a chance." She kissed him, brief and certain, there on the steps of her Humboldt Park walk-up with the afternoon sun slanting through the buildings and the blue line rumbling past in the distance. When they pulled apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "So, about that town hall, Al. The board approved a permanent position this morning," Marcus said. "Community supply coordinator. Real salary, benefits, on-site childcare. It's yours if you want it." Lucia looked at him carefully. "Because I earned it, or because you're the most qualified person I know. And because the community will trust you in ways they'd never trust me." "Then yes," she said. "I want it." The community center in Pilsen was packed. Mothers, families, aldermen, local business owners, all wanting answers about formula prices and empty shelves. Lucia and Marcus stood at the front together, a laptop connected to a projector showing the new transparency portal. Real-time tracking of every distribution truck, every depot, every retail partner. "This is live data," Marcus explained. "Updated every hour. You can see exactly where products are going and flag discrepancies directly." A woman in the third row stood. "How do we know this isn't just for show, that it won't disappear in 6 months?" Lucia stepped forward. Because I'll be monitoring it. I'm the new community supply coordinator. She met the woman's eyes. And I have a 7-month-old son who needs the same formula you're buying. I'm not letting this slip. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. After the town hall, after the handshakes and promises and cautious hope, they walked to Marcus's car in the cold February night. Your place or mine? He asked quietly. Lucia took his hand. Yours. Mateo's with Carmen tonight. They drove through Chicago's lit streets, the city spreading around them like possibility. Inside his apartment, windows overlooking the river, the skyline soft with winter fog, he kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like they had all the time in the world. And for once they did. 3 months later, spring came to Chicago with the kind of hope that felt earned. Lucia stood in the H&C Community Outreach office, her office still strange to think, and watched the transparency portal on her screen. Green pins across the south side, Little Village, Pilsen, Humboldt Park, Bronzeville. Every pin represented a verified retail partner, every route tracked in real time, every price locked at the caps they'd fought for. Formula that had cost her $44 in February now cost $29.99 everywhere. Accessible, reliable, fair. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she now had saved. How's my favorite supply coordinator? She smiled. Your only supply coordinator. And I'm good. Mateo's first birthday planning is taking over my life. Need help with that? You're the CEO of a major food corporation. I think you have other things to do. Nothing more important. Lucia looked at the framed photo on her desk. Her and Mateo at the community center, surrounded by the mothers who'd attended that first town hall. Women who now had her direct number, who called when something looked off, who'd become partners in keeping the system honest. Another photo sat beside it. Her and Marcus at the Chicago Riverwalk at dawn, taken by a passing jogger who'd offered. His arm around her shoulders, both of them tired and content, the city waking up behind them. They'd been careful, professional in the office, private about their relationship until the investigation was fully closed and legal had cleared every possible conflict of interest. But 3 months in, they'd stopped hiding, started building something real. Her desk phone rang. Carmen from Little Stars, her voice warm. Ms. Vega, just confirming, Mr. Chen is picking up Mateo at 5 today? That's right. Thank you, Carmen. Marcus had insisted on meeting Mateo properly, had shown up nervous with an age-appropriate toy, and proceeded to let a 10-month-old grab his expensive tie while he read board books with surprising enthusiasm. Mateo had loved him immediately, which had made Lucia's heart do impossible things. At 5:30, her office door opened. Marcus appeared with Mateo on his hip, the baby babbling happily and waving a board book. Someone wanted to show you his new word, Marcus said. Oh yeah? What's the word? Mateo looked at her with serious dark eyes, her eyes, and said, clear as anything, Mama. Lucia's breath caught. First word. She'd missed it because she was working, but Marcus had been there, had brought him straight here so she could hear it again. Can you say it again, baby? She whispered. Mama, Mateo repeated, then smiled. That gummy, joyful smile that made everything worth it. Marcus set him gently in Lucia's arms. He said it 3 times in the car. I recorded it on my phone in case you wanted proof. She looked up at him, this man who remembered that first words mattered, who'd rearranged his CEO schedule to do daycare pickup, who'd stood beside her through scandal and investigation and community town halls. Thank you, she said quietly. Always. He kissed her forehead, then Mateo's. Now, I believe someone promised me homemade empanadas if I brought the birthday boy home safely. Did I? You definitely did. I have it in writing. They left the office together, her, Marcus, and Matteo, and stepped into the soft May evening. The city hummed around them, busy and indifferent and beautiful. The brown line rattled past overhead. Lucia shifted Matteo on her hip and took Marcus's hand. Once, she'd stood in a cold apartment at 2 a.m., desperate and alone, and dialed a number she didn't think anyone would answer. Now she walked through Chicago with her son and the man who'd called back. And the math finally worked. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you did, please subscribe and leave a comment. I love getting to know you better. And be on the lookout for our next story of strength, perseverance, and love. It should be on your feed very soon.